Hello, sir. Thank you for the wonderful talk. Sir, much of your talk has been centered around consciousness. Here, as a biologist, I want to ask you certain questions. So, the kind of science that is established today and the kind of science that we do is based on very hard evidence. The kind of reproducible evidence that both you and I can reproduce if we do the same kind of experiment. We will get the same result, and which we can publish, right? So the whole world will know. Now, when you say that we can maybe change the framework and we can say that evolution can be brought into the framework of consciousness as it is told by Vedanta, how can we quantify consciousness at this level? How can I say that the consciousness of a bacteria is very different than mine? Because here again, I want to bring another point. The kind of consciousness that Americans or the Western scientists think about is very different than the consciousness that Vedanta and what we are discussing. I think this year or last year, Harvard scientists have actually published a paper where they have actually found out a neuron which they claim is responsible for consciousness. So their idea of consciousness is very tangible. It is a neuron. Our idea of consciousness is very different. It is experiential. So how can I quantify that experience? How can I quantify the experience of a bacteria? How can I quantify a experience of a living being like me? And how can I put it into a framework of evolution that the Vedanta talks about? And how can I publish a paper by doing an experiment on it so that the whole world will know?
Right. And actually, he is asking a question about which I am right now writing an article. And it will be like giving away the whole thing, but it's okay. Some 3 weeks back, there was an interesting article in Scientific American. Okay. And that they have specifically asked this particular question. That there is this is the exact words they are saying, that there is an epistemic gap between we having a neuron, studying a neuron, and then the consciousness that we are talking about, and then through that consciousness again looking at the neuron. There is a big gap, and this is the gap that creates what David Chalmers calls the hard problem of consciousness. And then they refer to another one scientist. They say this was first identified by one Gordon Globus. Gordon Globus, you can remember this name. So what Gordon Globus does is, he calls this the world knot. That this particular gap that exists between the neuron and the consciousness, and then through the consciousness studying the neuron, this he calls the epistemic gap, and he calls this the world knot. And then going through his papers, all of these are serious papers, not something he is writing for public consumption. He is a serious scientist. He writes in language that is really needs 2 cups of tea and aspirin. And he says that this is what is Maya. In a serious paper, he says this is what is Maya. And then in criticizing another scientist stand, which is actually the top to bottom approach, that you have the chemicals, then you have the probiotic molecules, then you have the neurons, and then you have the consciousness. He criticizes and he says that you are underestimating. It's again a serious science paper. He is saying he is underestimating the power of the goddess Maya. And interestingly, this is what we say, the creative or the undefined principle, that is the avyakta, that is present. And based on avyakta, whether you will be able to create actually a paper on consciousness that is workable is something that we have to look at. At least one person who says he can is Stuart Hoffman, who studies consciousness through what is called the Bose-Einstein condensate as being the basis of consciousness. So Stuart Hoffman says that it is possible to use the framework and study it. So as I am writing this paper, once I publish it, I will tell you It is not, an article, not a paper, an article in which I show how Gordon Globus uses Maya as a basic framework to create a scientific model for consciousness, and it has helped science to understand consciousness in a very hard evidence-based way. Okay.
I have a question, sir. Thank you for your illuminating lecture. Suppose if there is a conflict between two different Indic thoughts, then I want to know which one will prevail. I'll give an example. Suppose we take Tamilians as example, and there is a city or town where Tamilians have built. Tamilians are there, they have prospered there, lived there for a very long time, and there is this excessive pride over that piece of land or your language. Consider it as mother, and all this is an Indic thought. Consider your language as a mother, have respect it, and you teach your children the same thing. This is one piece. Suppose there is a lot of inflow of, say for example, anyone who is not a Tamilian, non-Tamilians. Over the years you get displaced in your own place, you make yourself less relevant, or you are made less relevant. Then this proceeds, and there is this another Indic thought, Aditi Devo Bhava. Which one will prevail in this case?
See, I will take this as another example. I will give another one thing for this. Krishnadeva was a Kannadiga or Telugu person, and right, we don't know, right? It is still debatable, and he chooses Andal, a Tamil poetess' life, to write an epic on. Okay, the point is, you have an example of a Vijayanagar empire where there has been multilingual people living without losing their identity, but at the same time with no enmity. Down the line, you see Tamil Nadu, you see Karnataka, Kalburgi, the late Kalburgi wrote, it is because of Krishnadeva Raya you today find a lot of Tamils in Bangalore. He wrote in a very contemptuous manner. So he is very angry. The great rationalist was angry that you find a lot of Tamils in Bangalore, and it was the crime of Krishnadeva Raya. And in Tamil Nadu, you have the Tamil chauvinists who say that it is all, you give them anything, they will say it is Vadga conspiracy. It is the conspiracy of the Telugu people against, or it is the conspiracy of the Malayalam people against Tamils. So the point is, from where we have come to where? Where we have created this conspiracy theories, and we have created this other based on again the Western categories. Based on again the Western categories. Take the entire Tamil literature. Can you find a single word in Tamil literature where it says that Telugu is bad, Malayalam is bad, Kannada is bad, but Tamil is great? We never said that. In fact, we say Pasha Ruba. It is all languages are divine. All languages we consider as divine. And not a single language. It is because Tamil is my mother tongue. I naturally consider Tamil as a sacred language, a divine language. That does not mean I have a right to tell other languages Milaisha Bhashas. We have never said that. In fact, we have been told as children, we have been given stories which taught us otherwise. Unfortunately, we no more read those stories. I remember this story by this famous king, Sadavagana. So Sadavagana was actually Potter's son who became an emperor. And then he was taking bath with his wife, and he was throwing water on her, and she said, stop, in Sanskrit. So our king, he didn't know Sanskrit, so he said, bring her a particular sweet dish. And she laughed. And then he felt very bad. He wanted to learn Sanskrit, and he told in the court, I want to learn Sanskrit. Then one courtier, one court poet, he rose and said, I would teach you Sanskrit within 1 month. And then there was another court poet who was a very great Sanskrit scholar, and he said, no, You cannot teach a person Sanskrit in 1 month, and if you teach a person in Sanskrit, I would never again talk in Sanskrit or Prakrit. He said this. But within 1 month, the king became very fluent in Sanskrit. So this particular Sanskrit scholar, he, without uttering, because he had made a vow, he won't talk in Sanskrit or Prakrit, he didn't know any other language, he just left the court. And after some time, this is a very beautiful story, the king realized that the meat he was eating was of inferior quality. So he called the cook. He asked the cook what happened. The cook said, nowadays this is how we are getting the meat. So he called the tribals and asked the tribals who supply meat, asked what happened. And they said, see, all our animals are becoming leaner and leaner, we don't know what is happening. So the king went and checked. He wanted to check what is happening. And he found that there was this man with a big beard and all sitting, and he was singing some song, very beautiful, very melodious, and he was then burning that in a fire. And all the animals were standing around him, and they were all just listening to his melodious voice and the songs. And that is the reason why they were all becoming leaner and leaner. They were not taking anything. They were all the time listening to these beautiful songs. When he went there, he found that this was the man who had told that he won't talk in Sanskrit and Prakrit, and he had left. So what he did, he learned the Paishasha language. And he composed poetry in that. That poetry was so beautiful that the animals were listening to it and they were forgetting their food. Seeing that this guy was destroying all the poetry that he had written, he was putting the palm leaves into the fire. The Satavahana went and held his hand and said that, what you are doing? And then he said, now I can only talk in Paishasha language. And any poetry written in Paishasha language is not worth. So I am destroying them. And then Satavahana said, no, every language is worth, and he preserved them. This is the kind of stories with which we grew up. All these stories were cut off from us. And then we are given these scenarios like the Tamils getting marginalized, or the Telugus getting marginalized, the Tamils dominating, the Telugus dominating. It's really pathetic. I will conclude this with one statement by Babasaheb Ambedkar. In fact, I consider Bodhisattva Ambedkar as one of the pinnacles of Indian culture. And he said, talking about linguistic state, in 1956 he attained parinirvana. In 1955 he wrote his book on linguistic states, and he said, it is not one language, it is not one state for one language, it is one language for one state. When you are creating the linguistic divisions, he said, it is not one language, it is not one state for one language. That is, the Tamil Nadu is not created for Tamils alone. In Tamil Nadu, Tamil is the administrative language. It is this one language for this state. It is not the state for the language. We have to take that into consideration and we have to operate. That, I think, is one of the important aspects of Indic wisdom that Babasaheb Ambedkar said.